Welcome to Branches. My name is Alexis. I'm an amateur genealogist, and in this channel I discuss everything genealogy. In today's video, we will be going over part 2 of the interview of Griffin Webb, a World War I veteran. Also, before I go on, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that little bell notification so that you can be alerted when videos go live. Let's get into it. Okay, in the last video, we left off where Griffin was talking about living on a farm and 15-acre farm sort of thing. And for those of you who haven't watched part 1, you should definitely go back and watch that video. But Griffin Webb was born in April 24th, 1896, and he was 83 years old when this conversation took place. And he passed away January 21st, 1987 in Mobile, Alabama. All right, let's go on to the interview. Okay, so Glenn says, looking back and thinking about some of the good things that we had there, kids today wouldn't know about what barter was. Where we grew corn and scuppernongs and things like that, we took to Ocean Springs, remember? And we traded them at Mr. Gaucher's store. We would go in the back door with our goods and come out the front door with things you couldn't grow. So I guess they traded the things they could grow for the things that they couldn't grow, probably like household things, I would think. Yeah. And Griffin says, yeah, that's right. Glenn says, you mentioned flour and things like that. And Glenn says, tell the kids how that worked. You didn't have the money. Griffin says nobody had any money. No, that was out of the question. When we got a job and worked, they worked for 75 cents to $1 for 9 hours. That's what we worked for, $1 a day or 75 cents a day. Can you imagine making that kind of money now? We'd never make it. But you would take $1 and it would buy a lot of groceries because they were cheap. I bought picnic hams at 3 cents a pound. 3 cents a pound. Right there in Ocean Springs. And you take dried peas and beans and stuff like that. I failed selling them, cleaned, thrashed out, and everything for 1 cent a pound. You couldn't sell them to the stores. They didn't want them. Glenn said, what was it like when you were growing up? What was the difference growing up then and today? Griffin says, oh God, there was a lot of difference because when you were coming up, we had plenty. We could get all the fish we wanted, different kinds. We had all the bacon we wanted, all the pork we wanted. We had a big smokehouse filled full of hogs, killed 8 or 10 more. Fill it up. We had cattle. We'd butcher cows, hang it up in the smokehouse, and smoke it. And we had sweet potatoes and corn and a little mill to make our own cornmeal. All kinds of peas and beans and stuff like that. Sweet potatoes and Irish potatoes. People don't raise that now down here. There was no work to do, but there was plenty for us to do at the house. You had your own chickens, your own eggs, and your own chickens to eat. Raise your own chickens. Did you know times were good then? There wasn't no money. You'd meet a man on the road. He wouldn't have a nickel in his pocket. He'd have plenty at home, plenty to eat. Yeah, raise sheep. Made all your own mattresses and pillows and stuff. Make your own quilts out of wool, solid wool. And Glenn says, yeah, there was more to do, like you said, fish. And Griffin says, yeah, and taxes weren't much. 22 acres, and I think the taxes on this 22 acres were 35 or 40 cents. That's all. Can you imagine paying that little bit of taxes? People would not be losing their homes and their land today if it was that cheap. You could buy all the land you wanted for 10 cents to 50 cents an acre. If it was out on the hill, big timberland, it would cost you 50 cents an acre. If it was lowland with not much timber, you could get it for only 10 cents an acre. My old home where I was born and raised, 22 acres. It was only 100 cents an acre, or 10 cents an acre. And it was right on top of a hill. Had to cut the timber down to build the house on it. Glenn says, Pop, how much education did you have when you were growing up? Griffin says, none at all. It was 9 miles to school one way. That's a long way. And Glenn says, and there's not a thing that people say that's around town here that you can't do. You're one of the best carpenters in this area. You have taken timber trucks, tore them down, and put them back together again. As far as the engines, and all that you have is self-learned. Griffin said, all I've learned is actual learning myself. Learned it all myself by watching other people. Glenn says, so you have watched and learned from other people? And Griffin said, yeah, when I was just coming up. You'd be watching those other people work and see how it was done. I can do most anything as much as working on an automobile. Glenn says, I remember you used to work on quite a bit. Griffin says, yeah. Glenn says, even in the late 30s and 40s when we used to go to what they called the community center in Fontainebleau. Griffin says, yeah. Glenn said, how did we used to go? Griffin said, we went down there sometimes in a truck, a Model T truck. Then we went down there on a horse. Yeah, Tony was his name. Glenn said, we used to fill that thing with hay and watermelons and go down there to the community center. Griffin said, yeah, to a turkey shoot. They still do turkey shoots around here. Glenn said, and a dance and picnic for the kids. Griffin said, yep, that's right. Glenn said, you guys would get around there soaking up the old corn liquor and telling stories and chasing the kids away. Griffin said, yeah. Glenn said, Mommy used to get in there with the quilting, didn't she? They were sewing quilts and things. Griffin said, yeah, had the quilting. They had all kinds of things, dressmakings. She was at that kind of mess. I was out there with the turkey shoot. Had me out there with that. They wouldn't let me shoot any. I wonder why. Glenn said, why wouldn't let you shoot? Griffin said, because I hit the bullseye every time. Of course he did. Glenn said, you didn't win too many turkeys from that place, right? Griffin said, at the time, my nerves were settled after coming off the battlefield. Got back to normal, like they should be. Now, when I was in the service, made first-class pistol, and for 200 foot, I could get a bullseye every time with a .45. I didn't have a rifle. Had a pistol with that artillery. Well, when I come out, we went out on the target range there. We was on our way to Germany, and I stopped there in Luxembourg. And we went out there for target range and backed off about 300 yards. And I missed the whole target. I still wasn't right. I'd lost out. When I was on the battlefields, I could hit right on the spot, yeah. But after I left, it was all over with. I got that nerve trouble when I finally got over that. Of course, at my age now, naturally, I'm nervous. Anybody that's never been in battlefields is nervous. The age, it gets your nerves. Glenn says, I remember up there at the turkey shoot, they wouldn't let you shoot because they'd say, I'm not shooting against Griffin Webb. And the only time you'd get to shoot is if they had a bunch of new guys come up there that didn't know you. Griffin said, that's right. Glenn says, and some of the old timers would sit up there and make bets on you because they knew you were going to win. Imagine being that good. Griffin said, yep, that's right. Glenn says, I remember a lot of times that you weren't at the turkey shoot, but you were out in the back swamp there, and you'd come back with a big turkey. Griffin said, oh yeah. Glenn said, just a wild turkey. Griffin says, yeah, there was plenty of turkeys here then. They got here about 5 years ago. There was plenty of turkeys right here in the county, but they got killed out. They're hunting them out of season and killing little turkeys, yeah. Glenn says, after Van Cleve, you moved to Ocean Springs, didn't you? Or Griffin says, no, I moved over to Chudacabuff, where they're over there at Buck's place. Glenn says, oh, Chudacabuff then. Griffin says, in Harrison County, and I've been in Harrison County. Well, I was in Harrison County after World War II, and then I moved to Stone County, and I've been there ever since. You know, the war was just over with when we moved up here. I don't know if they had taken Germany or not. I don't believe they had. I think that they were fixing to take Germany. Glenn says, let's see. All your boys were in the service, weren't they? So all of Griffin Webb's sons were in the service. He says, yeah. Glenn says, well, I'll be darned. Every one of them in different services too, just about. Griffin said, yeah, the Marines, Army, and Infantry, and the Navy. Glenn says, they've been all the branches. What do you see is the difference, say, the young people today compared to when you were young? Well, there's quite a lot of difference. When I was coming up a young boy, when that sun went down and it began to get dark, we went to bed. Of course, we'd get up before daylight the next morning or daybreak. And now the young boys today, before it gets dark, they leave, and they'll come in anywhere from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the morning. You know that? That's one difference in them. And they go to these honky-tonks, into those big dance halls and places. We didn't go to those things. We'd go maybe once every couple months to a dance, and we was too young to dance. Just older people danced. Yeah, and now these boys are here. Well, they want to get an automobile, the biggest and the finest one that there is, and they want plenty of money to spend, and there's plenty of money if you can get a hold of it. Glenn says, what about family? The difference in family today and when you were younger? Well, the main difference, Griffin says, the parents made the children mind. Didn't allow them to go out and stay out all night, go to these different places. And now they just go out and drink, come in all times of the night, and everything's all right. So Glenn says, do you think the kids of today have a close of ties with family that you did when you were young? Griffin says, is what? The family traditions or family ties of respect. Griffin says, I don't know. They're not tighter. They're not close enough. Because, boys, they get out and they roam the streets, go from one town to another. Well, back then they didn't do that. No. And you minded your parents. You done what they told you to do. Now they don't mind their parents. Half of them don't mind their parents. You know that. It's so different even now from when this was recorded. It's funny how times change. Glenn says, one thing that I see that I feel is changing a lot is the family ties and traditions. I can remember when we were growing up that we would have family get-togethers. Griffin says, yeah, all the family, and there was a lot of times grandmother stayed with you, and you knew your grandma real well because she lived in the same house, so to speak, or right near you. When it was time to do something, it was family tradition. Yeah. Glenn says, do you feel that's kind of falling today? Griffin says, yeah, family get-togethers has all about vanished away, like brothers and sisters, cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents, all of them. They used to have big get-togethers and a big dinner, have a big eating. They don't have that no more, very few of them. Once in a while, you hear tell of families that have get-togethers, but not no more like they used to be. It was a steady thing, used to be. No one meets one another now. They don't. That's interesting because my family, also, my Grandpa Webb was included in this. We've always had big get-togethers, usually a family reunion once a year. So my family has always done that, like since forever, obviously. But it's kind of interesting. He's saying that they don't do that anymore. And this is in the 80s. Okay, I'll go on. Glenn says, do you think it's more the parents' fault of the problems we're having today with the young people? And Griffin says, I think it's the parents' fault. I believe that's what it is. By taking from the little fellows, young people today, they ain't got time to take care of the babies. They're working off, or they're going somewhere and carry them to babysitters. They get a babysitter. Glenn says, we never had babysitters, did we? And Griffin says, no, never had no babysitters. Glenn says, when you went somewhere, what happened? Griffin said, you carried all the children with you. Yeah, carried all the children with you. Glenn said, that made a family, didn't it? Griffin says, yeah, now these days, instead of carrying the children with you, they leave them at home with someone or carry them to a babysitting place. And if anyone's 9 to 10 years old, well, then they go with you. Yeah, I'm telling you, there's some big changes made. That's interesting because of times have changed. So women have not been able to stay in the home and take care of the children. You're not able to take, if you have a bunch of children. Of course, not everybody has like 10 children anymore. A lot of people only have 1 or 2 children. So it's a lot easier to take them with you. But back then, people had a lot of children. I can imagine toting all 15 children, 10 to 15 children with you. That's kind of crazy. Okay, I'll go on. So Glenn says, what would you say is the biggest? Griffin said the biggest change, it's in the people, the way they raise their family. Of course, now you got some people that raise their family like they used to raise them. They don't allow them to go out until they get old enough, but the average run of them just lets them go, just turns them loose. Just like you open a gate where you got a lot full of cattle and turn them out. That's the way they raise them. They just don't raise them like they used to. Now, you come from a long line of different traditions, Glenn says, different beliefs and things. Do you feel like the kids today are less respectful of you than what they used to be? Griffin says, do you mean children? Well, there are some children, but not like the older children. They respected you. The old people was respected, so I say then 50% now. Glenn says, they don't have time for anyone. And Griffin says, they don't have time for anyone. Don't have time. Used to. Young people took up with old people and talked with them and listened to them talk and go on and laugh with them. But they don't do that now. No, they want to get in their class. They're a younger class. Teenagers want to get together. They don't want old folks around. That's the way it goes. They don't. Now, of course, none of my children were raised that way. So as you can see, things were a lot different back then, obviously. The way families were raised, or the way he raised his family. And it's interesting because, you know, I'm his great-granddaughter, and I've always known my family to get together, have big get-togethers. Like for Labor Day, any holiday we would use as an excuse for family to get together. Family would come from Mobile, from all over, and we just get together, go out to Flint Creek, go to a community center, just hang out and talk and see each other. Cousins playing with cousins and everything else. And I do feel like, especially now, barring COVID times, even before COVID, I feel like people weren't really doing that as much. And it's interesting because in the 80s, when this interview took place, he was saying that wasn't happening. And I guess he would be right. Because on my other side of my family, my dad's side of the family, they were not close at all. There were no get-togethers, no family reunions, nothing like that growing up, especially for my dad and his siblings. My dad said he never remembers any kind of family get-togethers, like ever. So that is interesting that he's saying that, because I guess it is true. And the way people are raising their children, how, you know, there was no babysitters, but in today's time, everybody has to work away from the house. You know, you're not on a farm. You're not there to take care of your children at home. You now have to go out and work, so you have to have a babysitter or somebody to watch your children if you have children. So that's interesting. You know, times have really changed a lot whenever you look back at, but also times aren't, I feel like we're regressing a little bit, maybe. I don't know. Because of COVID, it really makes you appreciate the time that you do have with your family, if you're lucky enough to have family. But yeah, this is it for part 2 of the Griffin Webb World War I vet interview. And I will see you guys next week. Also, don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to the channel and hit that little notification bell so that you will be alerted whenever videos are live. And I'll see you guys next time.